Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Yes. It's good to see everyone. Thank you all so much for sticking with us today. Can we have another big round of applause for all our panelists and for Pamela? So now it's my absolute pleasure to announce the final discussion of today. Please welcome, once again, the Henry R. Luce Professor of Journalism and Dean of the Graduate School of Journalism, Dr. Jelani Cobb. Joining Dean Cobb on stage is the woman of the hour, an award-winning journalist, artist, and sculptor, Ms. Dana King. Dana's career and success as an artist to date speaks directly to storytelling, a sort of artistic activism, and so much more. After co-anchoring the debut of Good Morning America's Sunday edition and reporting for CBS Morning News, she joined San Francisco's KPIX as its co-anchor for the evening news. Today, Dana is a nationally recognized artist. From Alabama to California, she has received commissions from institutions nationwide. In order to fully focus on her art, in which she does see sculpturing as an effective medium of storytelling, she retired from journalism in 2012. In 2018, the Equal Justice Initiative commissioned Dana to produce a piece to be displayed at the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. Today, the sculpture is a representation of the woman who led and sustained the now famous Montgomery bus boycott. Ms. King's sculptures have highlighted notable figures such as the late and Honorable William Byron Rumford, who was the first African-American elected to the California State Legislature. William Lansing, a formerly enslaved Black man who fought for voting rights and expanded economic opportunities across the state of Connecticut, and Dr. Huey Newton, co-founder of the Black Panther Party. Dana has also helped to co-found See Black Women, an organization that centers and promotes the efforts of Black women artists and activists nationwide. Dana is a proud recipient of the honorary degree of the Doctor of Humane Letters from Cal State University. Let's all please welcome Dean Cobb and Dana King to the stage.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, what a day. This has been such a gift. It's so amazing that the voices of such strong, beautiful, intelligent Black women are leading the way in this country. I know we carry so much on our backs and we will continue to do so, but for the women that we have before us that do that, I honor you. I honor you. Thank you. Thank you for the stage, Jelani Cobb.
I think being familiar with your work, I would have to include you in that category of women that you were just talking about. So I want to give you, I guess, a little bit of background about this, which is, there's a kind of interesting irony about how we came to work together on this project, which is, because we met, this was like 4 years ago, maybe even more than that, at a fundraising event in the Bay Area. And we were both speaking at this event. The main thing that I remember which was like, there was like a silent, no, it wasn't a silent auction, it was an auction. And someone mistook the number and bid for something, and then was like, wait, it's what, how much? Then I had to come back out and re-auction the thing. It was like super embarrassing. I said, I hope he slipped out the back door. Because I was like, I always wonder like what would happen if somebody was like, I thought you said 1,500 instead of 15,000 or whatever it was. And so in any case, we were kind of laughing and talking about this, backstage. And then just kind of I think I left that event and went directly to the airport and flew back to New York. And we were not in contact aside from that, just kind of passing conversation backstage. And then all the time goes by and we initiate this project, and Pamela McKelvin, who is around here somewhere, she's in the back, she can attest to how many different iterations of the conversation we had about who should do this piece of work, this piece of art. And we were like, it has to be someone who has a connection. And we didn't know what that connection was. It was like, maybe it's someone who was from the surrounding community in Harlem. You know, maybe it's an artist who is a black woman. Maybe it's but there has to be a kind of connection. And we talked to Louis Long, who is, there's Louis over there, you know, a great curator over here. And you know, we had a couple of conversations with Louis, and was like, oh, well, you know, this person and that person. We had conversations, we had lunches, and then Louis said, have you thought about Dana King? And I was like, wait, I think I met her. And then we started talking, and we were like, a black woman journalist who is a sculptor.
Light bulb.
Bingo. And we were like, that really was like what kind of nailed it. And so it was so amazing to get to work with you on this. And so I thought that it would be good, I wanted to talk about your perspective on journalism and your career in journalism, and then sequentially talk about your career as an artist, and then maybe we can wrap up with some questions about this specific piece of art.
All right. Sounds great.
So, I mean, we've talked about these things, but I am interested in talking a little bit about how you first came to be a journalist and, you know, your initial experiences in the profession.
Right. Well, I didn't have a normal trajectory. I didn't even want to be a journalist. I have a degree in business, and I started at a TV station in the sales department because ultimately I wanted to run the station, because I felt like that from that position you could control a lot of things. Diversity, equity, and inclusion being specifically those things. And I had a boss who liked to move his people around. He fired the only black woman on the air, the only black person on the air. And mind you, this is Los Angeles, KABC, the #1 station in the #2 market. And he didn't know what to do, and he panicked. And his secretary, a woman named Verla Rammel, said, why don't you just hire Dana? So he called me into his office, and he said, I want you to be a reporter. And I said, where? And he said, here. And I said, on TV? And he's probably rethinking, maybe she's not smart enough to do this. And I said, no. And he said, but I want you to be a reporter. And I said, oh, well, okay, great. I'll do it. But if I don't like it and I'm not good at it, I want my job back. And if you don't like me in this position, I want my job back, because I want your job. And he said, deal. I was roundly hated in the newsroom. I had no business being there. I worked with people who had worked their entire careers to get to that station in that market. And I just walked across from the sales department. I went to UCLA, I bought their course study on journalism. I sat in front of the TV and studied my colleagues and others in the profession. And I worked very hard not to embarrass my colleagues. And I know that I did. I was terrible. There was no reason for me to be on TV. I would forget my name. I would be, I'm in front of this fire. Back to you in the studio. I couldn't remember the names of the anchors. I worked in journalism for 25 years. So I did figure it out, but I never lost a modicum of nervousness about it. I've been all over the world, Afghanistan, Iraq, Kosovo, Rwanda, Central America, and I've met the most amazing people and have such deep honor that they entrusted me to tell their stories. I loved my job until I didn't love it anymore. And I found myself saying things like, you know, when I was a reporter, why we always or we never. And then I thought, oh, I've become that newswoman. I've become a crotchety newswoman. I gotta go. I also didn't want to grow old on TV.
Hold on, I want to like jump into that, but I want to have that as its own kind of conversation. If you give me just 1 second. But I want to talk about the nervousness part of it. Because interestingly enough, I was talking with my students. I'm teaching opinion writing this semester, and I was talking with my students about this. And I said, I don't even have any idea how many columns I've filed in the course of my career. I don't have any idea how many courses I've taught in the course of my career. The second before I walk in that door, I always have a split second of nerves. Always. The second before I hit send, before I send something to my editor, I have a split second, even if it's just that moment, of like anxiety about it. And I really want that. Like, I really think it's important because it means I'm not taking any of these things for granted. You know, that no matter how long you've done something, you still have to kind of recognize that it's a skill and it requires, you know, diligence, and that you cultivated the skill set to do this. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you know, your kind of growth in the profession, you know, things that you did learn, the stories that stayed with you, the way that you got to the point where you would describe yourself as a newswoman.
Wow, it took me 10 years. 10 years to feel like I understood the profession and the job, and that I deserved to be there. I've covered my kids used to call me the disaster queen. Like, I would go to countries that were embroiled in I didn't cover war, but I covered the immediate aftermath. I covered the Muslims being pushed out of Kosovo. I was in Rwanda for the 10th commemoration of the genocide and interviewed people whose lives were shattered. One of the stories there that I believe has become part of a documentary is the man whose entire family was killed at the, I want to say, Murambi school. And it was a place where the French told everyone to go. Go there, you'll be safe. And everyone who went there was murdered and thrown into pits. And this man was shot in his head, and which was almost as horrible as it sounds, a gift, because other people were hacked to death and brutally, violently murdered. And a bullet meant that you could die quickly, but he didn't die. And now he oversees this genocide site where his entire family is buried. And as a journalist, I always tried to keep an emotional distance, because I felt like my feelings around how their stories went had no business involved in the interview. But his story was so painful that I had to stop the interview and walk away, and I barely got it back together. I mean, his pain was palpable. I could see it, I could feel it, and yet I had the responsibility to share that story with people in a way that included his pain and suffering, but went beyond it to the universal pain and suffering that his country, men and women and children, experienced. And it's one of the hardest stories I've covered, because it was so personal. And he never leaves there. He lives on site, or he used to live on site. I don't even know if he's still alive. Those are the kinds of stories that I felt were important. When I first, my first international story was to go to Honduras after Hurricane Mitch, because I saw on CNN, they just used the same video. It was wallpaper video. And in that video, and they would tell different aspects of the story, but the same video. And in the video coverage was a little girl who was standing over a square that someone had started to dig out. And they were digging down into her home. And she was standing there. She looked ghostly, and I wanted to know what happened. Was her family down in that mud encrusted? I mean, I don't even know how deep it was. 8 feet, 10 feet deep of mud. And so I went to my boss and I said, I need to know her story. I need to know who she is. I need to know what happened. And we need to tell these stories individually. We can't just tell this horrific story as some blanket thing. There are individuals there were thousands missing. And so he said, okay, go. And I took her picture with me, and I never found her. But those were the stories that I brought back. And the power of the medium was such at that time. I'm a local reporter at this time, traveling to these countries. I didn't work at the network anymore. That's its own story. You saw that face, didn't you?
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to go was because I wanted people to understand. Actually, some of them were very difficult, complicated stories, and I thought, if I can understand them, I can share them. And San Francisco, the Bay Area, is such a place where dozens of languages are spoken, and people immigrate to the area, and the populations deserve to know what's happening in their homeland. And, but those are the kinds of stories that I love to tell. And I didn't like to cover politics. I felt like a politician wasn't going to ever tell me anything he or she didn't want me to hear, that my questions meant nothing. We had an amazing political reporter, a man named Hank Plant, who could get politicians to answer his questions. Why duplicate that? Why try? But that journey to those international stories took me 10 years. And it took me that long to feel confident as a reporter, and confident in the voice that I had to share stories that were completely different than your everyday local news. If it bleeds, it leads.
You mentioned that the politics of growing older on air, and I wonder if you could talk about. There's a specific anecdote that you shared with me about that, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about it.
Sure. I was 27 when I started on air, and I had 5 years as a sales rep. So I had a pretty decent career going. And so I went from knowing what I was doing with my life and my job to not knowing anything. But what I did know when I took the job was that I was going I was going to lose my anonymity. And how was I going to navigate that? I also knew that I didn't want to grow old on TV, because I did not want some man saying to me, you know, Dana, you need to pull this up and tighten that and maybe lose weight, or, you know. And now I see how women dress differently. I mean, I went to work every day in a suit, and it was a black suit. They hated it. It was dark. I always wore dark colors. They wanted me to wear bright colors, and I said, no, that's not me. And I want people to hear what I'm saying, not watch the news to see what I'm wearing. And the age thing, I wanted to be out by 50. And I didn't have a plan. I just knew I didn't want to grow old on TV. And by the way, I only worked for men. All those years, 25 years, I never worked for a woman. And so I went to cover stories in Ghana. And I went because they still have witches' camps in Ghana, in northern Ghana. And it's a country of very intelligent, well-educated people, but there is deep superstition there. And what happens when a woman hits a certain age, when she can no longer contribute to community, meaning she's menopausal, she can no longer have kids, women often get run out of their homes, literally. And if they survive that, they end up in a witches' camp. Those witches' camps have been there since the 1600s, since we had the Salem witch trials. And so I went to Ghana, and I was able to enter these witches' camps. A terrifying story, but I'll just tell you about the women. And they were women a little older than me, and I was moved by their lives. And what happens when you enter a witches' camp is your family then pays the witch doctor to keep you there. And when you grow to an age where you can no longer take care of yourself, they send a little girl from your family to come and take care of you. And she becomes a witch too. So when I came home after telling this story, I decided I was no longer going to dye my hair. I was dyeing it like every 2 weeks. And I had really short hair. And so, I wanted to stop dyeing it because I was a woman of a certain age. Why would I hide that? Why would I hide the experiences that I had behind some facade that didn't match what I've learned, my experience and any wisdom that I've gathered along the way? And my boss said to that, oh no, you can't do that. And I explained to him that after I came back from that story, I got more mail, literal mail, and a little email by that time than I had ever gotten my entire career about any story. People wrote me, women wrote and said they wished they could let their hair go gray, but that they were afraid they would lose their jobs. Men wrote me and said, I wish my wife would let her hair go gray. Men wrote me and said, I wish I could let my hair go gray. My boss didn't care. I mean, the local news audience is 35 to plus. It's not 20. But they think, or my bosses at the time thought, that we could bring in young viewers to the news and we'll somehow do it. And so keep dyeing your hair.
Right.
Like,
with men, it's gravitas.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so, so I dyed my hair one more time. And when I looked in the mirror after I was done, I said, that's it. I'm not doing it again. I'm not going to do it again. I made a commitment to the viewers. And so I got a new boss, And the first day he was there, he called me into his office and he said, "Hey, listen, love your work, blah, blah, blah. But your hair." And I sat straight up. I said, "What about my hair?" He said, "It's a distraction." And I said, "What about my male anchor whose hair is white?" Well, I won't tell you what I said, but after he said it was a distraction, I just said to myself, that's one MF. And I told myself to listen.
MF stands for what?
Major friend.
Major friend. Okay, thank you.
I told myself just to listen, don't say anything, and breathe, and remember everything he says. So I said, my co-anchor, he said, "Well, because your skin is so dark and your hair is so white." And I said, "That's two, Emma."
Major friend.
And then I tried to explain to him the story about Ghana and why I wanted to be honest with the viewers about who I am. Well, he wanted to know if I would wear a wig. And I said, "That's three." I stood up and I said, "Listen, you do what you got to do. I'm going to do what I have to do. I need you to come back at me with a price. My contract's not up." And I gave him the date. He said, "Oh, I'm aware." And I said, "So you can come at me one time, and if it's not acceptable, then I'm going to have to sue you." I went running back to my office, got on the phone, called a friend, said, "Who's that lawyer who does, And I call this woman, I tell her the whole story, and I'm writing it down so that I don't forget anything. And she says, "Yeah, you have a lawsuit, obviously. Gender, age, but, it's a long road. It's a long road." And I still had a child in college, out-of-state tuition. I had a soon-to-be ex-husband. And so he came back at me with a number. I was gone in a week. But the beauty is that I had already gone back to art school. I was 2 years at getting my, here it is again, MFA. Which means
Major friend of the arts.
Exactly. And I had started my art practice, and I had fallen in love. Seriously, I would take classes, because I worked at night. I would take classes in the daytime, and I would run to the studio. I'd be filthy, covered. My hands were, paint on them. And then I took a weekend course with a master sculptor. And that was it. That was it. I couldn't even finish the whole weekend. I went back and said to this poor man, "Listen, I can't stay. I'm full. I have no more room in my head. I just have to go do this." And I've been doing it almost 15 years now, ever since. So I was 48 when I went to school. We can do the math. I'll just tell you, I'm 64. And now I can look back and see the path that led me to sculpture, because I covered living history every day as a journalist. But now I get to create history in bronze and in a material that lasts forever. Because if you
Can you talk a little bit about because we've had these conversations, but I would like everyone else to hear a little bit about your philosophy on bringing visibility to the people who whose likenesses you create, and some of the work that you've done and the way you've approached it.
We all know, we all remember that photograph of the little boy touching President Obama's hair, right? And that little child said, "Oh, we have the same hair. And you're the president of the United States." I mean, what got instilled in that moment was that I could be the president of the United States.
I have to tell you, I told everyone earlier, today is my daughter's 7th birthday. Yesterday, she was just sitting at the table and she said, "Daddy, how long will it be until we have a lady president?" And I said, "I don't know, but it's something we have to work really hard to make it happen." And she said, "Maybe I could be it."
Bravo, man.
And I said, "I think you could, actually." As I started thinking about her personality traits, I was like, yeah, I mean, you already think you're the president, so that's a start,
The president of this house.
Right, exactly.
That's beautiful. So what? You have to be 35 to be president.
Yeah, so 28 years.
Okay.
Right. I'll start printing up the vote for Linux buttons
There
now.
you go. TikTok, 28 years. Yeah, let us know. But so it's that representation. I now live in a state, after living in Oakland, California for a long time. What we do there is activism. I moved to Florida. And there are people who don't even know I moved yet because I'm embarrassed to tell them. And I moved there because my daughter and son-in-law took my 7-year-old grandson and moved there. So I had to go. But I still wanted to know why God wanted me there. Why do you want me here? Why? And I also said to myself, I had a conversation with God. I said, "Listen, I'm not going to do anything when I'm here. I'm good. I don't need new friends. I got my people right here. I don't even want to get involved in the politics here because I'm broke. I was there a week. Wrote a letter to the governor. I was there 2 weeks. I wrote a letter to the college board after they wanted to change the AP courses in African American studies.
I don't know anything about that. Nicole, do you know anything about that? I didn't hear anything about that. I think I got cut out of that syllabus, as a matter of fact.
Probably.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
But
I'm saying, when you wrote to the governor, did you ask him how tall he really is?
No, but what I told him, I said, it was against the law for us to learn to read and write. We learned to read and write. You can say you're going to take away our history and try to invisibilize us. We're going to learn our history ourselves, and we're doing that in Florida, in the basement of churches again, just like we did in civil rights era. So so I basically said it really doesn't matter what you do. You're going to do what you do, but I want you to know that we will find a way. And I also told him I had just moved there from California, and that I was recruiting people to move there. I said, because if we could flip Georgia, we could flip Florida. May not be in my lifetime, but we can do it. So, I create representation in statuary. I believe that our history is vital to be seen in the public sphere so that it's free, whether you find it by accident or you find it intentionally, you will learn something. And my hope with the work that I do is that not only will you learn about the person who's being honored in bronze, but that you will use the opportunity to dig into your own history, that you will look back into your family and learn what your history is in relationship to what's happened in this country. I consider my work subversive because I take the materiality of what is predominantly European statuary in this country, and I use it to tell our story. And as I said, you know, it's a material that lasts forever, which means that generation after generation, the story can be told. And it will be the truth of American history.
Can you talk a little bit, well, I'll share just a little bit of context for us, which is like all of the best ideas, no one really took ownership of the idea that we should have a bust of Ida B. Wells in the lobby here. I can tell you the context though, which is that we began having conversations in the aftermath, like many institutions, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, and about the iconography and the fact that the only people memorialized in our lobby were white and male, and that journalism has been practiced at the highest levels by people of all backgrounds who did important work, and none of that was represented. And that came up as part of the conversation. And in the midst of those discussions, someone said we should have a bust of Ida B. Wells in the lobby. And I'd also had conversations with generations of students, beginning long before I was dean. When I first came here as faculty, generations of students who felt like guests as opposed to stakeholders in this institution. And so, you know, the one thing that I knew about leadership when I became dean was that I don't have to have every great idea. I just have to know how to recognize the great ideas when they pop up. And so I was like, yeah, about that Ida B. Wells thing. And we revisited it. And so that is the beginning of how we got to this place. And then, you know, there are an array of people who I'm going to thank, you know, before we do the unveiling, but that's how we started on this path. And I wondered if you could talk about, from your side, how you approached the sculpture and what you were thinking about in terms of, you know, Ms. Wells Barnett, and how that translated into the work that you created.
First of all, thank you for your courage to bringing this bust to this Ivy League school that has centered male whiteness since the beginning. Ida B. Wells' courage must have infused, it's infused in all of us, right? If you read her book, if you have read Ms. Gidding's book, you know that she was an unstoppable woman. And I will share with you, you're not gonna like it, the conversation that we had. You said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing.
Oh Lord, what did I say?
That, you know, you are the dean here. You didn't really ever expect to be the dean of an Ivy League school, but you are the dean. Don't know how long it's gonna last, but while you're here, you're gonna make some significant changes on behalf of Black and brown and those who never felt a sense of belonging here.
I think you dressed it up. What I actually said was, while I'm here, I'm going to do shit.
You know, and that stands for SHIT, is Sound Heroes Invested in Truth. Thank you. That's you, man. No, that's not. No, I'll take that back. I mean, that is you, but it's not shit. It's way more than shit. So I just like when I was a reporter, research is the foundation of the work that I do when I create a sculpture. And so I read Ms. Gidding's book. I read Ida B. Wells' autobiography. I read a lot of old newspaper articles and looked up photographs. And the thing that struck me, yes, she died at 68. But from the age of 16 on, when she was on her own, she became the woman who, in her 20s and 30s, excelled at the work that we're talking about today. That she doubled down on going out into the world and yes, keeping track of lynchings, but honoring the people who were lynched by naming them. When you go to the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, the reason we have the names on those Core 10 steel drums that hang is because of Ida B. Wells. And the only reason we know what exactly happened to those people is because of the work of Ida B. Wells. And in fact, to me, the most profoundly sad part of the National Memorial for Peace and Justice is when they killed one of us and didn't even bother to find out our name. And it's the anonymous victims that just break my heart. But it's her work that allows us to know this history. And that took a level of bravery and courage that in her 20s and 30s. And so when I was creating the bust and looking at all the photographs of this beautiful woman, I wanted her to represent that time, because the people in this building that we're trying to reach are of the same age. And I want them to see that she did so much for so many, for so long, and it started when she was young. And they're young, and they can do the same thing. Don't wait. Don't think you can't. Don't think you're not ready. Don't think you don't have the power to go out and do the stories that are important, that change people's lives. She did, and they can. And I want them to see that every day. Every day. And so Mr. Pulitzer is off to the side when you come in. He's off to the left side. And his statue's, it's a bust on a base, and he's about 80 inches high. So I wanted to make sure that Ms. Ida B. Wells was also that tall. And so she is on a very high, she's on a 48-inch base plinth. And she's 25 inches tall. And around the waist of the bust is her name, the year she was born, the year she died. And on the back, we're going to have to pull it out a little bit, I think, is truth on the back of her waistband. Because that's what this job is about. That's what this profession is about truth. And I am encouraged by the young people that I've met here, and I'm encouraged obviously by this day that we will get back to that it exists, that it's happening, but there are a lot of lies out there. And the job is dangerous. It really is. Because the people who are telling the truth, who are in this room, the people that don't want it told are dangerous people.
That's absolutely true.
And so this has become a different kind of profession than it was even 10 years ago.
So we have time for a few questions. There's one other thing that I wanted to point out, which is that we had these spirited conversations, as always, and ongoing about the Thomas Jefferson statue up front. And I have to tell this again because my colleague Elisa Solomon is in the back. And during that summer of 2020, when I was like, we were talking, I won't say who floated what idea, but like the logistics of removing Jefferson in the middle of the night came up. And I was like, wait, are we how serious are we about this? And so, in any case, we wound up not doing that at that time. But it's very much intentional that when you go to the lobby, you'll notice that when you walk past Jefferson and enter the building, you go past Jefferson, the first person you see is Ida. And that's very much intentional.
I have a piece, it was a temporary piece in Golden Gate Park called Monumental Reckoning, and it surrounds 350 degrees of truth, and it represents the first boatload of African descendants of Africans who were put in the bowels of a ship and sent off to lands unknown. They might as well have been sent to the moon in 1619. And they landed in Virginia, and there were 20, 25 people on board left. Many had been sold off, many jumped overboard, many died on board, and I wanted to honor them. And they surround a plinth to a known white supremacist, known to us, but not known, not widely known, and people don't want to admit that he was a white supremacist, Francis Scott Key. And and I used to believe with my whole body that we should tear down all those monuments to white supremacy. And now I believe that we need to tell the whole story. 360 degrees of truth. Because it's all part of American history. But now we need to tell the whole history. And Monumental Reckoning was a temporary installation. It's since come down, but this Juneteenth, we will have 350 black women that will surround that plinth. Because the ancestors that I created that surrounded that plinth were all women. And it's usually children that realize that. They're like, why are they all women? Because we all come from women. And as horrible as slavery was to everybody, I think that we suffered more. Our children were taken from us. We were raped. Our families were split up. We were violated in ways that men were not able to be. If they could have been violated in that way, they would have been, I'm sure. But so I wanted them to all be women. But.
So we have anyone who has ever been to any event that I've done knows about this disclaimer I'm about to give, which is that a question is an interrogative sentence, generally denoted by the inflection at the end. Is differentiated from a statement in that a question requests information while a statement offers information. We are prioritizing questions which we would like to have framed as succinctly as possible, which will allow us to get to as many questions as possible. Thank you.
I don't know
No
why
pressure.
you did that right now. Okay, you just stole my thunder. I thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I wanted to ask you, what do you feel should be done about the Confederate statues and busts around the country? Should they be taken down? Should they be destroyed, tucked away, hidden away someplace? What should we put in a museum with an explanation?
Can I pitch in here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to give you a succinct version of this. It's a much longer story. But in 2010, I did a Fulbright fellowship in Moscow, which is a time when you could still do a Fulbright fellowship in Moscow. And I went to the Red Army Museum, which chronicles the entire history of the Red Army, which by far precedes the Russian Revolution. It goes back centuries before that, in fact. And so this museum had every artifact going through the multi-century history of the Red Army mounted on the walls until you got to World War II. And when you got to World War II, all of the artifacts from the Reichstag building in Berlin were on the floor. They were surrounded. There was, a kind of rope that kept anyone from interacting with those objects. But those objects were not hung on the walls. And they recognized the importance of preserving those objects. One of the things that we tend to forget, but that Russians never forget, is that 26 million Soviets died in the course of World War II. If you want to understand anything about Russia, including anything in modern geopolitics, you have to begin with that fact. And so in the wake of 26 million of their people dying, they said these objects have to be preserved, but they cannot be preserved in a way that provides them with any degree of honor. We should steal a page from that, in that we should not remove. I'm opposed to the removal of the Confederate monuments. Mm-hmm. We should topple them and leave them on their side like chess pieces to recognize the defeat. And they should be contextualized in saying that this monument once stood upright, and when we gained more knowledge, we knocked it over.
Good answer. Oh, by the way, this is my roommate back here telling me that I'm an alum from 73, the class of 73. She said, you didn't tell them who you are. Karen Gray Houston, class of 73, and
Thank
author
you.
of a book about the Montgomery bus boycott, daughter of the boycott.
Daughter of the boycott, all
So
right.
important to tell our history.
All right, you heard the title of that book, so.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Olajumoke Oni, and I'm a junior at Morgan State University, multi-platform production major. So I kind of just wanted to start off by giving you like your flowers and just saying that it's super interesting how even within your career in journalism, your art shined before you even realized it through your aesthetic and your look. So it sounds to me like you truly fulfilled your purpose. So my question to you is, how do you feel within your work? How do you feel your work within journalism translated to your art and made you that much more unique?
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate being seen. I think it's a direct. What I learned as a journalist populates how I operate as a sculptor. I prefer to take on commissions of histories that are lesser known. We have plenty of sculptures of Dr. Martin Luther King, and we're familiar with the story, and I'm proud of those. But there are millions of stories that can be told in statuary, and I'm at a point in my career where people come to me with their desired person that they want to honor. I have a sculpture of Ella Baker for Ohio State University that I will start working on when I get home on Tuesday. And so I appreciate that people are out in the world thinking about the need for statuary that tells the story of African descendants in this country. But I see a direct line, a through line from being a journalist and telling stories with a different material, with a material that if you didn't see it, it was gone, right? Now you can watch it over and over and over again, but when I started, not the case. Whereas I tell stories now in bronze that can last forever. And I feel like it's a continuation of the work I did as a journalist. And I don't think I could do what I do had I not been a journalist. And the way that I create my work is, I feel like I take the same steps to honor as objectively. I know we talked about that word, but I want to find out as much as I possibly can about them, because they're way more than what we read. They're way more than what we've seen. The bust I did of Dr. Huey P. Newton, I could read until my eyes fall out his work. He wrote many, many books. He was a theoretician of the Black Panther Party. I could have created him with his beret and his leather jacket and his, white shirt underneath. But in talking to his widow, Frederica Newton, who honors the legacy with the Dr. Huey P. Newton Foundation and the Black Panther Party Museum, had I not had her in my studio with me, I wouldn't have known what kind of man he was. He was a human being before he was Dr. Huey P. Newton, co-founder of the Black Panther Party. And what that tells me is that the work that I need to do needs to dig deeper into the personal history of that person beyond what their outward success was, so that that person can come through. And I hope and pray that that's what you see today when you see the bust of Ida B. Wells, that you see her humanity and her passion and her fearlessness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Curtis. I'm also a student from Morgan State University. I wanted to ask, you talked about the mistakes that you made along the way when you started in broadcast journalism and the tensions in the newsroom. How did you get past that and give yourself grace to continue on in the field?
Ooh, that's a good question. On tax day, I had to do 3 live remotes, the 4 o'clock, the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And I was still at a point in my career where I wrote everything down on my little notebook and I read it. And on that day, it was windy and my pages started flapping in the wind. Some I had already torn off, and I was left just staring at the camera, panicked. And that was in the 4 o'clock. So this is the example that the thread to get to your answer. I had 2 more live remotes to do, and I was mortified. I was embarrassed. I had embarrassed, everyone. And I somehow got through them. Actually, I don't know that they came back to me for the 5 or the 6 o'clock. I went home that night. I could barely get my key in the door, and I was in a puddle of tears. Shame. And I decided that night I was going to go to work and quit the next day. And I worked. They stuck me in the newsroom with the old timers in the back. And Fred Anderson, Henry Alfaro. Who else was there? There were Gene Gleason and one other man. And I went in with my head down, and they sat me down and told me all the mistakes they made when they were coming up. And it blew my mind, because these were the old timers. These were the guys that they would stand around in this room that we shared and just riff on stand-ups. The president's leaving town. The president's plane is just starting up. I'm standing here at LAX at and he's headed off to Delaware and will be landing there at 5:05. I'm Henry Alfaro, back to you in the studio. So this is the kind of stuff they would do for fun. Them telling me all their mistakes made me realize that we all start at the bottom. We all start at the beginning, and we all make mistakes. And you have to give yourself some grace. And so I didn't quit that day, and I went on to a 25-year career. You will make mistakes, and they'll be bad, but you won't make them twice.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
I think we can squeeze in one more question. We can do them really quickly. If you ask your question really quickly, we can do last two. Okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Deanna Neal. I'm also from Morgan State University. And
Morgan representing.
Hey. It's a national treasure. What can we say?
Although we did beat y'all in football when I was at Howard, so. We had such a good vibe here. And then Jelani just started bringing up old problems and everything.
But I love art in general. And I wanted to ask you, you said you want what you want us to see when we look at her bust, but I know sometimes when we are creating artwork, sometimes it invokes a spiritual emotion inside of us. What exactly did creating Ida B. Wells again, molding her with your fingers, what emotions came about during that?
Wow.
And we have the question after that, and then we'll answer both at once.
Hello, and I could be obstinate, David Peterkin, class of '82, and state my question as a statement, but I'll try and formulate it as a question, which goes with the one right ahead of me, which is, I would like to hear you discuss the physical act of creating this bust, because it's so much different. I mean, there's a physical aspect to journalism, but this is a different thing, and just I'd like to hear what your process and what you went through for this one in making it. Thank you.
Okay, I could put those two together.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw the film. What we showed here was an NAACP Image Award nominated film called, they changed the name of it. Freddie, what is it? Alive in Bronze. And it's the making of the bust of Dr. Huey P. Newton. And every time I open a 25-pound bag of clay to start a new sculpture, I'm terrified. I really am. Will it come through? When will it come through? How will it come through? How will I do this? It was almost like when I would go on vacation after and come back to work as a broadcaster, I'd be like, how am I going to read the prompter? I don't know what's been going on in the world. So the clay, I work with wet clay, water-based clay, and it's heavy. It smells like earth. You can make it at home, and it takes a while for the sculpture, for the person to come through. So I'll tell you the story. When I was making Huey, Huey had an incredible physique, and I had a really thick neck, and from working out in prison, right? He had a prison body. And I wanted Frederica to see how far I'd gotten with him, and he, he's basically a neck and a like a Frankenstein head. And I forget that I know the process. I know where I'm going. They don't. She didn't. She was mortified. She was like, that's really great. Didn't sleep for 3 days, she said. It's the same with Ida. It's me and Ida in my studio. And I talk to her. I communicate with her. Sometimes it's verbally, most of the times it's in my head. And I have all kinds of pictures of her around me. And it goes through many iterations. But I endeavor to create a likeness that if a family member looked at what my work is, they would say, yes, there they are. It really, it is a spiritual relationship. My pieces are family. I visit them. I go to Hartford and see William Lanson, and I've been to Montgomery like 5 times to see Guided by Justice, and I take it's not about me, it comes through me. There are times I will look at my work and go, where did that come from? And I know it came from God. I am a vessel. I don't know where this gift came from. From the first time I took that class and fell in love, I knew it was a gift I was being given to be used on behalf of Black people. It's my love letter to Black people. And I've said it before, Freddie argues with me, it's not a revolutionary act to create this work. It's a necessary act. But I need to do it, and I feel like it needs to be done. And I am just one person, and there are so many stories, and I hope that the work encourages people not only to find themselves and their people and their stories, but I hope it encourages children to create that kind of work. It's not popular work. It's classical figurative sculpture. They don't have big art shows about it, for it. I don't want my work in museums ever, because I don't want the white structure that builds museums to determine whether or not this work is deserving. It's deserving if you think it's deserving. And I make it for us. So I hope that answers your question.
So I said we were done with our questions. E.R. Ship is that came up because E.R. Ship knows full well I'm not going to say E.R. Ship can't answer a question. But this is knowledge she possessed.
Important.
This is knowledge she possessed when she stepped up to the microphone. So my humble request will be that you ask a succinct question and we give a succinct answer.
This will be a succinct question. It was going to be a statement, but I'm going to turn it into a question. Were you aware that Wikipedia, which I have recommended to my students up until now, is saying you are dead, that you were murdered last week while celebrating your birthday?
What? Yeah, we can correct that. Let's correct that. We will.
Just have a birthday.
So it was a question. Were you aware?
Yeah. Well,
were they wishing that on me? Huh? I don't
so
even.
hold on.
What
What we're gonna do is that we're going to refute all that negativity and all that foolishness. We're going to stand up and applaud this woman for her brilliant work and her contributions as a way of affirming her life and that she is here with us. Thank you.